The man in that footage is Rajwinder Singh, the man accused of murdering Toyah Cordingley, only 24 years old, in Queensland back in 2018 in October. It's 4.5 years in the making, and he is now in Cairns in Queensland, and it's expected he's going to be charged with murder soon. Oh, far out. Some of you have joined me. Originally, I had this set to private because I just wanted to do a quick little update and then just upload it to the channel for people to watch. But there are people here. How excitement. Hang on, my hair's a mess. I won't be turning my camera on. I'm literally off to the gym shortly. So, hey, Ruth, how are you, gorgeous? You're awake. Cement Shoes, g'day, Groover. Hey, Green Eyes, isn't it good news? Yes. He apparently arrived in Melbourne last night, but he, an hour ago, roughly, arrived in Queensland. So it's pretty cool. Like, when we first talked about the extradition proceedings and I looked at some examples, you know, it looked like it could have taken a long time, like a year, to get him here. And the last time we talked about Toyah's case, it was about how the Indian court had expedited the extradition. So he's arrived. Hello, beautiful Scout. You won't be seeing either of us, but we will be on later. It is batshit night tonight. So I got called into work last night, but I wasn't attacked by a shark or whatever it was that Finn told you all in Discord. But you'll definitely be seeing me and Sunny Bum a bit later on. It is absolutely fantastic news. Hey, Deb, how are you, gorgeous? So, yeah, really just a little update for everyone that is following this tragic story. I'm just going to get the full article up from ABC News. But her family and friends must be feeling elated that he is now in the country and murder, you know, at least one murder charge is imminent, potentially other charges as well. Really good to see you all in here. It's nice to know that people are interested in Toyah's story. Australia has very strict privacy laws, as most of you know, and we don't have trials broadcast live. And despite the fact that taxpayers pay for our judges, the public don't feel or entitled to or expect to be able to watch trials, and our justice system runs pretty smoothly as well without the public scrutinising everything online. So, yeah, posted an hour ago. So, yes, Rajwinder Singh is expected to be charged with murder shortly after touching down in Cairns on a charter flight. Looked like a little Learjet to me. I hope they didn't give him any snacks on the flight. Police will allege Rajwinder Singh killed Toyah Cordingley on Wangetti Beach in October 2018 and then boarded a flight to India the day after her body was found. And he pretty much was off the radar in India for, well, 3 and a bit years, until last year when the reward for information leading to his arrest was lifted to $1 million. He got dobbed in and arrested. I'm all for rewards. They work. Not always, but this is a situation where it did. Toyah was walking her dog at the time on the beach and her body was discovered by her father. Can you imagine? He went searching for her after she failed to return home. Mr. Singh was working as a nurse in Innisfail at the time and was living with his wife and 3 children. So, I mean, even they've been through hell because he just took off the next day. I was reading an article or listening to a news story while I was setting everything up that they do have DNA evidence connecting him, because I always wondered why he was so quickly named publicly as being the suspect. I mean, you'd think it could be something like DNA, but it was actually confirmed in one of the articles. Thank you, Scout. just that one step closer to justice, you know. I think it would be, I mean, it's any event or episode, anything that happens while you're waiting for justice to be served, it does bring back so many memories, and it must be just the most horrific process to have to go through. But hopefully there's a little bit of joy knowing that he's back and soon to be charged as well. It's a big step towards justice for Toyah. He arrived in Cairns. Oh, so he arrived 12:43. There is a time difference. But yeah, a few hours ago. And he had been in Victoria, the state of Victoria, in Melbourne overnight, where he arrived from India. He briefly appeared in the Melbourne Magistrates Court for another extradition hearing. There's beautiful Toyah, 24 years old. Just look, following crime, it's horrible knowing there's always going to be stories to cover. But these beautiful young people that just have their lives cut short so brutally and so pointlessly as well, it really gets to me. We will be following this case as we have been from the start, even though we won't be able to do live broadcasts, but any information I can bring you, I will. So yes, here we go. Prosecutors told the court police have DNA evidence linking Mr. Singh to Miss Cordingley's murder. And then he was, as you saw, he was escorted from the plane by Queensland and federal police to the Cairns watch house. The watch house is like a holding cell or cells attached to the police station. So like if you misbehave and get arrested in the middle of the night, you end up in the watch house. And when I was a criminal lawyer, I got called to the watch house quite often at like 3 a.m. for bail applications, and some poor magistrate would rock up to court. Sometimes they still had their pajama bottoms on and they'd just put their robes on over the top. So yes, Singh, aged 38, is expected to be charged with Toyah's murder and could front the Cairns Magistrate Court today or tomorrow morning. If there are more updates, I'll check before I end this live. It's really good to have you guys here, though. Thank you so much. Cairns-based Detective Inspector Toyah Smith, who's been working on the case since the beginning and flew to India to bring him back to Australia, said it had been a long journey. There's another photo of him. And I reckon one of these two is probably Toyah Smith. Our primary focus has always been ensuring justice for Toyah, her family and friends without compromising the investigation, Detective Inspector Toyah Smith said. We've been determined to find answers for Toyah's family, and the work of all involved has been meticulous since that terrible day in October 2018. Our thoughts, and I know those of the tight-knit community of Cairns, have always been and will continue to be with Toyah's family. There's even a photo of him getting on the plane, or getting off the plane. Nope, getting on the plane. That was in India. Isn't that freaky? Because this isn't a chartered flight. This is just a standard flight, a Qantas flight. You never know who you're sitting on a plane with. Yeah, me too, Ruth. Although there's an interesting twist in this in a way. He has spoken publicly about the extradition proceedings, saying he wanted them expedited so he could get back to Australia to clear his name. So I'm not expecting a guilty plea. Hey, Kylie, good to see you too, beautiful. Cairns State MP Michael Healy. Now, this is interesting. There's very few cases now where people are including statements in press conferences and when being interviewed about social media interference. It's pretty interesting. I don't know if any of you guys were following the story. Oh God, why have I forgotten her name? The aristocrat daughter in England that was on the run with her American boyfriend, and they've now been arrested, and sadly remains of their baby has also been, well, remains of a baby in the area where they were hiding have also been found. Martin. What's her first name? Starts with a C. I don't know if any of you have been following it, but they were like kind of on the run, and they were picked up on a camera and dobbed in. And Constance Martin and Mark Gordon. And yes, they found the remains of a baby in the area where Constance Martin and Mark Gordon were hiding. And she hasn't even told the police. Like, she's refusing to talk about this baby that was allegedly born in January. They don't even know if it was a baby boy or baby girl. And she was on the run with this, like, so she's a daughter of an aristocrat, and she was on the run with this American dude who is a convicted sex offender and had served 20 years in a US prison for kidnapping and sexual battery. And they went missing in January, and they were initially arrested on suspicion of child neglect, but now the charges have been upgraded, I think, to suspicion of gross negligence manslaughter, something like that. But it's also been confirmed that they have found the remains of a baby in the area where they'd been hiding. It's really horrible. But, pardon me, hey, a blank slate. The reason that, I'll go back to your questions in a minute too. But the reason I mentioned Constance Martin too is that I heard when they'd arrested her and her partner, I heard the police talking in the press conference specifically about social media sleuthing and putting false information out there and how it could harm the proceedings and so on. We're going to see this more and more, guys. In fact, it's been a fairly constant thing in Australia for a long time. I remember when Jill Meagher was murdered. In fact, it's in my little video, one of my little videos, one of my Stop the Madness videos. But her husband, Tom, asking people on social media to be careful what they were saying so it didn't mess with the proceedings. But even with this news story that we're looking at now regarding Toyah Cordingley and her alleged murderer now being in Queensland, having been extradited from India, this is actually a politician who says that it's really important that the community lets the justice system run its course. It's been a long 4 years. I want to acknowledge the work of the Queensland Police Service. There is a legal process we need to go through, so we don't need to be seeing people making outrageous comments. This is about justice for Toyah, and we don't want to see anything jeopardise that. How often are the cops and politicians and anyone speaking publicly about cases going to have to say this stuff? How is the message not getting through to these sleuthing communities? How do they lose sight so quickly of justice for victims? And that just goes out the window. And then there's details about the background of her case, which I am going to go through very quickly. She worked at a local pharmacy. She was also a volunteer at an animal shelter in Port Douglas, which is a beautiful part of Australia. There's lots of photos of her with dogs and cats, like huge animal lover. And she had her own beautiful dog, Indy. She did a bit of shopping at Rusty's Markets and then picked up her dog, Indy, and they went to Wangedi Beach, which is 40 minutes north of Cairns, which is where Rajwinder Singh is now in custody. She didn't return home, so her family went to the beach with torches to search for her, and they found Indy tied to a tree, but no sign of Toyah. And the next day, police and SES crews were combing the beach, but it was actually her dad, Troy, who discovered Toyah close to where Indy had been tied up. It's just absolutely horrific. It's been a 4-year police investigation, and I mean the problem was that Rajwinder Singh jumped on a plane and got out of there. Local residents were asked to provide DNA samples as police reviewed hundreds of hours of dashcam vision supplied by the public. Tourists who'd visited the lookout that looms above Wangedi Beach were asked to look through their holiday snaps. And then in November last year, 4 years after her body was found, the government in Queensland offered a $1 million reward for information. And that led to him being dobbed in, and he was arrested while visiting a doctor in New Delhi. He was placed in Toyah prison in New Delhi, and he shared a cell with 90 other inmates. A cell. I'm just on the article, but I see some comments there, including yours, Scout, and I will jump back over shortly to address all of that. Mr. Singh has maintained his innocence and has told several media outlets in India he did not murder Ms. Cordingley. There's another beautiful photo of her. I'll go back up and get some of your comments. We'll leave Toyah on the screen. The death penalty changes. The penalty for we don't have death penalty. So yeah, if you're convicted of murder, I do believe each state has its own code. I'm just going to go to the Queensland Criminal Code. There are definitely murderers in Australia serving more than 25 years. I don't believe that's an across the board rule. Why is it not coming up? But one thing that is very frustrating in Australia is when they say life imprisonment, that sometimes can be like 25 years or 30 years or 20 years, which always annoys me. Life means life. 30 years in prison. So this looks like this is for Queensland, according to the, pardon me, according to the Sentencing Council of the Queensland government, 30 years in prison for murder of more than one person or by a person with a previous murder conviction. Yeah, because they can get out and walk around again. 25 years for murder of a police officer, 20 years for murder other than listed above, or for a repeat serious child sex offence. But this is where it gets really... Now I've gone to a different code or document. In Queensland, murder carries a penalty of imprisonment for life. And then it goes back to this thing, if there's more than one count, there's a minimum non-parole period of 30 years. So I'm thinking a life sentence, and at the minimum non-parole period is 20 years. So they could end up having, parole. The parole board might refuse them ever being bailed. But that's how it works. So yeah, he could be sentenced for 60 years, but it won't be for at least 20 before he can be considered for parole. And the parole boards in Australia, like I mentioned Jill Ma earlier, have been under such scrutiny for putting really nasty people back on our streets. They've all been sort of put out into the public to be scrutinised and for the issues to be addressed. So I'm thinking a lot of these people that are now being sentenced for crimes like murder, they are going to be less likely to be paroled than they used to be. But yeah, it still doesn't... life doesn't mean life in Australia necessarily. I mean, this is creepy sort of stuff. Like Life imprisonment is the most severe penalty now available in Australia, and currently about 5% of the total prison population in Australian correctional institutions are serving an indeterminate life sentence. The average term of incarceration is 13 years. How bad's that? I saw a clip of his brother saying he'd never do such a thing, but there's DNA evidence. So how's he going to explain it? Exactly. Exactly. I mean, we don't know what it is yet. You know, I mean, Indy being tied to a tree, they possibly got DNA off her or her lead, and that connects him to the crime. And then he'll say, well, I just saw a dog running around and I just tied it up. Maybe. I don't know. I guess we have to wait and see where the DNA evidence came from. Sadly, it's not some, Ruth. There are so many morons who don't care about justice. And I mean, this article again asking for people to just be really mindful about what they say, in particular online, because that stuff, as we know, spreads like wildfire. It should all be about the girl on our screen right now. It should all be about justice for Toyah Cordingley. That's it. Be really wary of any true crime channels you watch where they lose focus of who the victim is, who we're supposed to be fighting for. Be very wary. Hopefully that's explained the sentencing, Scout. Hey, Francesca. Yeah, only briefly. I'm about to go. Pardon me. I've drunk so many litres of water today. My throat, it feels like I've got a frog in my throat. I'm heading to the gym shortly, but I will be back later tonight with Finn. If any of you want to come and hang out on the Batshit channel. If you can't find it, it's because there's an exclamation mark in the I. BATSH exclamation mark T. Finn and I will be on at 8:30 having a look at some of the wacky stories from around the world in the last week. In regards to sleuths having lost the plot, there are a lot of uneducated, unethical people making a living doing the grift. Until it's a crime to get involved in that way, it will continue. Absolutely, a blank slate. Yep. The problem is they're not all uneducated. They just get caught up in this think tank of many, many people that are all out for blood, basically, and they get caught up and swept up in that, and they get thirsty. And I mean, surely they can't all be uneducated or unintelligent. Some of them have got to have brains, don't they? It's really scary, though. This beautiful girl lost her life. I feel for her family. That murderer will only get approximately 25 to 30 years. Well, no, not necessarily, Scout, because like I was saying before, it's a minimum, they have to serve a minimum number of years before they can be considered for parole. So he could be sentenced to 50 years, and then it gets to his 20 years where he's considered for parole, and they're like, nah, you're still a threat to the community, you're not going anywhere. And because our parole boards have been, and rightfully so, heavily criticised for putting convicted rapists and murderers and people responsible for horrific assaults back onto the streets, and then they've gone on to offend again and sometimes escalated, like Adrian Bailey, who murdered, Jill Ma. There's also a guy who murdered a beautiful girl called, it's just gone in and out of my brain, but she was murdered not long after Jill. Oh, I'm so sorry, Sarah. I can't think of your surname. But the same story, although her murderer had murdered before. I know as soon as I end this live, I'm going to remember Sarah's name and I'm going to be like, oh no. Hang on a sec. Give me 1 second. Cafferty. I knew it was like Cordingley, and I'm going, I can't get it. Cordingley out of my Sarah Cafferty. They were 2 Australian girls who were murdered by men who were out on parole. So, yeah, he could end up serving a lot longer, Scout. You're welcome, gorgeous. See you tonight, Francesca. Oh, thank you, Scout. You're a champ. I don't think there's... Yep, that's the end of the article, and I love that they respectfully put Toyah at the end as well. So it's pretty good news, I think. Like I said, it would be fairly triggering for families and friends every time something happens with their loved one's story that they are reminded of that. But also, this is one huge step closer to justice. It could have taken over a year for him to be extradited. India were very keen to assist. If he'd committed this crime in India, by the way, the penalty there is death. You know, and even he was keen to get back because, yeah, he keeps saying that he really wants to clear his name. So it's definitely going to be an interesting one to follow. Before I wrap up, though, Groovers, speaking of interesting ones to follow, even though I'm not able to watch every second of the Alec Murdoch trial, I think that would need to be like not just a full-time job, but an around-the-clock full-time job. I have been following it, and every now and then I'm like, oh, I'll pick another witness to listen to. And earlier today I was on a walk and I listened to the lady who was the carer for his parents. I know that her surname is Smith. I can't remember her first name, but she was amazing. Like her work ethic, holy hell. Like she worked at a school and also as a carer for a palliative care nurse, essentially. She was unbelievable. But how are any of you guys following it, and where are you leaning at the moment? Because I have bounced around and I've noticed there have been a lot of polls, and some creators seem to have a lot of people thinking he's guilty as sin, but they're not pitching the question in the way I would be, which is if you were on the jury and you actually look at it from the way the case has been presented and the way the prosecution have made some, I think, pretty big errors. If you guys were jurors and you were about to hand down your verdict right now, what would it be? I'm curious to see. That is, of course, if any of you are actually even following it. You might not be. Look at everyone nearly... Oh, poor blank slate. You're the only one without a wrench. On cement shoes. And Kylie. Why doesn't Kylie have a wrench? Green eyes. Oh, it looked like a sea of blue. Interesting. Why don't you have a wrench, Deb? This is ridiculous. Hang on a sec. Although I've got to be a bit careful on this channel. It's still small and it hasn't grown since I stopped covering the Idaho 4 murders. It hasn't grown at all. It's YouTube's so fickle. I don't want to cover it when there's really nothing to talk about. The search warrants for, you know, Pennsylvania, whatever. I'm still waiting for the preliminary hearing in June. Interesting comments. So yeah, there'll be more mods soon, but we've already got a bit of a sea of blue happening. So I remember when I used to go into little channels when I first discovered YouTube, and if they were all mods, I'd be like, I don't want to talk in here. You're welcome, and I'll continue to cover Toyah and other stories that aren't covered extensively on YouTube, and I especially want to cover Australian ones as well, because our system is very similar. The way our judicial process is very similar to yours, but we've got all these really strict privacy laws, and we don't go live from courtrooms going, check out this trial. I mean, as a member of the public, you can walk into a courtroom and sit there and watch it unless they close the court when there's minors giving evidence. But it's not broadcast around the country. However, if you want to watch a tribunal talking about whether or not there should be a cable car going up to the top of Mount Wellington or not, you can watch that crap. Lucky us. You can't watch him. You saw him lying on camera and he makes your skin crawl. It's funny because a lot of people that are criticising the prosecution are saying that he's endeared himself to a lot of the jurors, and there were jurors crying when he was giving evidence, and the prosecution haven't like reeled him in. They've let him go on these sort of very long descriptive explanations for stuff, and you know, using affectionate terms for Paul, like poor, and apparently there's indications that quite a few of the jurors are really sorry for him. So yeah, it's a doozy. I really wanted the prosecutors to be so brutal with him and just get yes or no answers and just like run over the top of him. And they didn't. They just let him ramble on. And apparently people have found that, you know, endearing, allegedly. Deb's saying guilty. But would you vote guilty as a juror right now? You don't have any reasonable doubt at all? Undecided. You need more evidence. Yeah, I'm undecided too. I mean, I haven't listened to every single witness. But I do want to listen to the cop who lied. Does anyone know his name? I've heard one person talking about it. I'm like, what's his name? Who was the cop who lied? A cop lied giving evidence and was caught out for it. Not watching it, Francesca? Yeah, I mean, I'm not either. Not to the point that I have a, you know, I'm certainly no expert. I mean, there are people in our community on this channel who have watched probably every minute of it. But just the bouncing around that I'm doing, I know enough about it. But at the moment, I don't feel like I'm listening to people who have pretty much watched it and their summaries of it, and not YouTubers. I'm listening to prosecutors and defense lawyers and former defense lawyers, and yeah, guilty according to a blank slate. You're terribly bored with it. It does seem boring. Well, it's certainly an expose of lives of the rich and famous, which repels a lot of people. I think it's been fascinating because there's so many shonky people on both sides, it seems. And it's just that sort of, you know, the wealthy protecting the wealthy and the powerful sort of thing going on. But I'm not seeing a lot of people saying that they would go guilty right now. There's no reasonable doubt. I think the defense have cleverly planted many instances of reasonable doubt. And if you're actually a juror and you're being directed repeatedly by the judge and the court on how to reach your verdict, I'd be surprised. They only need one person to have a reasonable doubt for it to be hung jury. He's going to jail for the rest of his life already. So there's also that interesting aspect to it. Because of all the financial crimes, he's already, the rest of his life is going to be spending in prison. So yeah, I'm finding it more interesting than boring. But I just don't have the time to follow it. And I mean, people are fanatical about it. Your notifications are working better, but it could be the purge I did. Yeah. And I think if you have a lot of notifications turned on, like I don't get notifications for channels I know that I'm subscribed to, and I have to actually manually type them in the search bar and go and watch their stuff. I wonder if they get, like, if you're in the top 5 or 10 channels that somebody watches, you'll get all the notifications. I don't know. When it comes to any case, I like to have as much fact, evidence, and testimony as possible before I make a decision. You'd be an amazing juror, Scout. It's not a. I think you're talking about the people being endearing. Yeah, I find him horrible too. He's a sneaky little ranger with beady eyes. Oh, just from what you've heard on mainstream media, you're going with the guilty. Interesting. Yeah, I can't think of the cop's name either. Yeah, no, there's definitely a cop who lied. If and when I find it out, I'll put it on my community page. That was kind of a critical moment because every eyebrow in the jury would have been raised. You know, if you've got a prosecution witness and it's a cop and they get caught out lying, and I think whatever they lied about was quite important. But I will try to find out for you, Scout. You've watched it every day. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if it was, you're an effing liar and it was said like that in court, but everyone has reacted to this cop who got caught out for lying. Liar, liar, pants on fire. Just a bit here and there, clips and a bit on Gray's channel. The rich get away with a lot. They do. Here's a weasel. I love you, humanimal. You just walk in, there's no g'day or anything like that. You're like, he is a weasel. He is a weasel. Let me see if I can find this cop's name before I log off. No, it's what I've found so far is all of Alex's lies. He's one hell of a professional liar. But nonetheless, reasonable doubt. But yeah, he lied about everything, about being at the kennels and all the clients that he lied to, that he stole money from. Yeah, I'm going to have to do some more searching, sorry, Scout, but there's definitely discussion out there on the YouTubes about it. The other cases that could be connected is something to think on. It's just like a bloody... I mean, it's not like a gripping novel that you can't put down. It's like a Barbara Cartland romance novel set in the South, with rich people literally getting away with murder, and it's sort of got that telemovie vibe to it, not some brilliant, award-winning thriller. It's got that tacky Lifetime movie thing feel about it. Yeah, look, I don't know, Bruce. We always get the good stuff here. We get stuff, that's for sure. Yeah, I'll keep an eye out for it too. I'm trying to think who I heard talking about. And look, I could be wrong too. It may not have been a cop, but it was certainly someone from the prosecution side, and they were certainly somebody that would be deemed to be telling the truth and honest. And that's why I'm leaning towards a detective or something. But yeah, an 80s miniseries. That's exactly what it's like. Shoulder pads and big hair and blue eyeshadow and yeah. Just the things rich people get away with in little towns, I can even picture the theme song for it. It'll be something like this. Oh, I don't know if I've got any music. Oh, yeah. I know that's more game show. Bad music. Behavioural panel. Yeah, I don't know. I kind of listen to them. I mean, I don't know what that particular, I don't know what the behavioural panel said, but all of those body language people, they're a grain of salt for me, along with all the psychos. I mean, the psychics. I find them interesting, but I don't necessarily find what they say to be necessarily legit, because there's so many different interpretations of the same type of body language. So, for example, when someone is shaking, or they're saying yes, but they're shaking their head no, or they're saying no, but they're nodding their head up and down, like the context of when that occurs, it can be very different meanings. And I was listening to someone talking about that because I was scrutinizing Alec saying yes and nodding or shaking his head no or whatever, but in the actual context of when it happened, and he was partway through answering a question, and then somebody, whichever prosecutor asked the question initially, added a little bit, so he was still responding, but then his face was sort of acknowledging that he'd heard that extra bit. So yeah, I don't know if everyone sort of realizes there's not just one rule for everything that bodies do. The context of when it happens is pretty important. But I think we all need to rely on our own little hinky meters a bit too sometimes, you know, when we look at people. And I mean, I just look at him and go, who else could have done it? You're telling me that in the 12 minutes from you leaving the kennels and getting back to the house, people got onto your property, the dogs didn't bark, which they would do to any unfamiliar people. Somehow these people managed to get not one but two of your guns and kill your wife and son, and you didn't hear a thing, you know? But that's sort of like the logical explanation that he did it, but does the evidence prove that? You know, that's the issue. When they brought on Dr. Phil, who brought on Dr. Phil? What? I thought they were rubbish till I realised three of them are top military interrogators. They're pretty scathing about a lot of behaviour peeps. They say you have to look at baseline. But yeah, I do remember them talking about baseline, because remember with Johnny Depp, his baseline was to be nervous and stumble over his words a bit and speak really slowly. And because all these body language experts were going, he's thinking really slowly so that he makes sure every single word is, you know, he's carefully choosing his words. And I reckon it was the behaviour panel that looked at him and they were like, that's his baseline. That's how he speaks. And that's a problem with a lot of those. I mean, I've learned a lot from watching that channel, Ruth. They're the only ones I really give any credence to. They're pretty interesting. And they disagree with each other too. You know, they're not all sitting there going, yeah. They actually will go, actually, I'm not seeing that, which I like. But yeah, the baseline is very important. The behaviour panel, yes. I talked on the behavioural earlier. Oh, they put Dr. Phil on their panel. I think Dr. Phil is revolting. I can't stand him. Did you ever see, there was a clip that, you know how like there's YouTube shorts? There was a YouTube short of Dr. Phil talking to this girl, young girl, and when she sort of gets up to sit on the chair, she said something like, I see that the person I asked not to be on the show today is here today. And it was like her stepmother or something. And he pounced on her and talked about, you know, are you telling me who I can and can't have on my show? And just absolutely barreled into her. And this girl was really polite and was sort of saying, no, you know, I'm sorry, that wasn't quite what I meant. And he didn't give a shit. And she was really young. and it was awful. Like, he publicly humiliated her on his show that, like the sleuthing community, the people that are in the sleuthing community love Dr. Phil. There, I said it. They brought him on as a guest analyst. He is Dr. Phil. Oh, actually, I've got friends with that surname, but I get it. It's perfect. Yeah, he is trash. And what is he like? Isn't he is he a psychologist? I mean, Oprah made him famous. And he's a cheat. So he holds a doctorate in clinical psychology, but he hasn't practiced. He didn't renew his license in 2006. I never knew the C stood for Calvin. Anyway, great. Let's get him off my screen. He looks like a penis. He's gone. All right, guys, on that cheery note. Yeah, not for a very long time. It gives you the crates, Deb. So, yeah, anyway, great news in terms of the quest for justice for Toyah Cordingley. Rajwinder Singh is now in the court in Cairns. Actually, give me one moment. Let me just check and see if he's been charged before I sign off. Two hours ago, they were saying 47 minutes ago, they were still saying he's expected to be charged. So, he's expected to be charged tonight. Hang on. Or is this the same article that I just read from and it's just been updated? Yeah, it's been updated just now. Woohoo! He's going to be charged with murder tonight, guys. Hang on. Let's take beautiful Toyah off the screen for a minute because I want to show you the updated thing just so that you know it's not me just talking out my bot. Here we go, guys. So if you have a look there under the authors, posted 2 hours ago, updated just now. Double check I'm showing it. Yes, I am. First paragraph. The man accused of killing a young woman on a beach in far north Queensland is expected to be charged with murder tonight. You little beauty. And look at the key points there. Look at that. It's important the community now let the justice system run its course. Are you listening, sleuths? That includes social media communities. And I'm just going to get Toyah's beautiful face up at the end. So that's brilliant news. And yeah, one step closer. I'm working tomorrow, so I may not be able to do another update tonight, but at the very least, if I see anything about it, I'll pop it up on my community page. I'm off to the gym, then I've got to go and feed my friends Puskins, and then my sister's dropping in to pick up a suitcase because she's going to Melbourne to see Ed Sheeran on the weekend. And then I'm going to come home and, I'll be home. I'll make some dinner, and then Finn and I will be live 8:30 p.m. on the Batshit channel with another riveting episode. So, guys, thank you so much for hanging out. And also, for those of you, like Scout in particular, I know has been following Toyah's story from the start. Thank you, guys, for your continued support for her too, and justice for her. Like, it means a lot. It really does. There's so many people's stories that never get told. This one just broke my heart. I don't know if it's the fellow beach girl thing or I just loved her mum when she was being interviewed, she was just the most real down-to-earth hippie lady, and I just adored her on sight. I'm not really sure, but it means a lot that people around the world are following Toyah's journey to justice. So thank you so much, everybody. You haven't heard of it? I've covered it a few times, Cement Shoes. I reckon you've popped in before and I've said, have a look on my channel. There's a few other episodes on this one, but it's very good news. And with luck, Rajwinder will have been charged with murder before midnight. And I will continue to cover her story, and I won't stop until we see justice for Toyah, her friends, and her family. But I really, really appreciate you guys hanging around. Do give me a little thumbs up if you can. I can't believe this went for nearly an hour. But I really appreciate having you all here. And I'll see you all again very soon. Bye, beautiful people. Oh, wait a minute. Don't get hit by, don't get struck by a smooth criminal. I'll see you soon.
Chegou a placa. On the carpet.